Those Sooner message boards never stop humming with recruiting. So we'll be right there with you, everyone. We'll deliver what you want. We'll talk recruiting. We'll talk the latest. We've got commits for 24 and 25. We got Jason Watkins here as well. So we appreciate Jason being the guy that makes it all work for us each and every Wednesday on Sooners Live. Get on over to College Football Hall of Fame podcast. That's Jason's deal. College Football Hall of Fame podcast. Jason, what's going on today?
Hey, Mark, thanks for having me back on the show. We just getting back from Big 12 Media Days. It was a cool week. We got to talk to a lot of guys, and it was a lot of fun, man. You go in and you hear a lot of coach speak and stuff like that, but there were some guys that were pretty impressive, from a lot of those teams, and you get a little bit of insight into kind of what you feel like is going to be the last season. Well, it is the last season for OU in Texas. So, there was a lot of talking out of both sides of Brett Yormark's mouth too. So that was kind of weird, but we had a good time though. We really did. We got to meet some former Sooners and do some stuff like that. So it was cool.
Yeah, I addressed some of his comments, which he's got to play it a certain way, but I just found it amusing right out of the gate. He says, we got a plan. We got to execute the plan. We got a plan. And it was obviously talking about expansion and realignment. Then 2 sentences later, he said, if we stay at 12, we're fine with that. We're good. We don't. Anyway.
It was weird, right? It's obvious that you need to expand once Oklahoma and Texas are gone. So I thought that was pretty funny too. But I think he was just kind of covering his bases in case they don't, and somehow the Pac-12 miraculously finds a media deal that suits them. So, or all of them anyway.
Well, Jason, before we get to the news of the day and the week and everything that's going on in recruiting, you've got a unique perspective on this, that there's a handful of you out there that would have this perspective because you've been an Oklahoma fan and ingrained in the Big 12 since when?
Since I was a little kid. Yeah. And I mean, when the Big 12 came together, that was back in the 90s. That's around when I graduated.
That's when you started watching.
But I mean, I watched back when they were in the Big 8, and then obviously the Southwest Conference, it was right in the neighborhood of where I was at. So, I know the league well. It's always been a good league. It's just been poorly run until now,
So you've got a lot of things working here because you're a businessman, you're a media guy, you're also, you do this like me. We do this originally because we were fans.
Absolutely.
We're still fans.
Absolutely.
But we have spun it into a media career. And so you get a perspective of, what's best for Oklahoma football, what are good talking points for just college football talk, and what's interesting versus having a 30-year run in the Big 8 transitioning to the Big 12 for you personally and following Oklahoma football. So that's got to be kind of strange. And then you hit the Big 12 Media Days this past week, and you guys are the outliers, Oklahoma and Texas to a certain extent.
Sure.
They are the outliers. They're the problem children. They are the short timers. They are,
right,
the angst of the media.
Yeah. It's well, and I mean, I've got a lot of friends in the media side of that too, having been around the league a lot, but I'll tell you, it did seem like that. And then, but of course, the thing about our show is that we certainly are locked on Oklahoma, but we do a lot of stuff with Texas Tech. Obviously we work a lot with Cody from Locked On Oklahoma State. And so we have a perspective, and even like, Tim Fitzgerald from Go Power Cats, at Kansas State. I mean, I like a lot of these guys and I love working with them. So, but it's good to get a lot of different perspectives about the league. Obviously, it was kind of like that. And you have the second in command of the Big 12, whatever, I forget his name now, but he was out there saying something about Oklahoma being the bridesmaids and they didn't really want to go, but Texas kind of made them and blah, blah. Like, that's even a thing, I mean, that was just so weird to me. And I think that there was some of that as far as like, I will say this. I think that whatever there was of that, that was going around there, and it didn't really seem to affect either Venables or Sark. And I said this the other day. I think that Sark really showed a lot more than I'm normally okay with, like, admitting, as far as, stepping up and admitting to what it, or, owning the fact that they're the favorites for a reason, and that there's really not an excuse for them not winning. I thought that was pretty stand up of him. And then when it came to Venables, he owned the 6-7 record. He talked about what it was going to take to get better. He even took a swipe or two at some coaches from other leagues, when it came to Cristobal in Miami, and then of course Coach Prime. And I don't know that it was so much a swipe at Coach Prime as it was comparing how they do things, and he didn't agree with it. I think that's okay. I don't have a problem with the way Coach Prime's doing things. I think that it's a different situation than it was for him to pick up, even though Oklahoma was decimated a bit, it wasn't Colorado. Let's be honest. It's one the same thing. And he's had to use the portal quite a bit as well. We talked about that quite a bit too. So, that part of it, I'm kind of on both sides of that, where I'm like, did you need to go there? Probably not, but I don't necessarily mind it either. And that's part of what kind of makes college football fun, is that they kind of poke at each other and, and fan the flames of possible, maybe they're going to end up playing them in the future or whatever. And I think that that's kind of what you've seen, with these schools out of the SEC as well. I'm excited about the SEC. I can tell you that. It's just one of those things that, even though I have grown up around the Big 12 and I know these schools, I know these teams, I'm excited to get a chance to go, to take the lap around the SEC and see everything that there is to see about it. And that's what's kind of pushing this channel, forward, is that we not only want to get deep into the SEC, but we want to stay in the Big 12 as well. So we're trying to grow, and kind of similar to what you do, and just try to do as much as we can and bring as much content as we can to the fold. And, we're having a good time with it, man. That's the one thing I can say about it, is we're having a great time. So it's whatever happened there as far as how they felt about it and stuff. And like I said, I felt like Yormark was definitely talking out of both sides of his mouth. I don't understand what that whole thing was with this number 2 guy. I didn't even know who he was until he said all that stuff. I gotta be honest, but it was it was kind of funny.
Well, Jason, one aspect of this expansion and realignment that's different than anything we've seen since, I'm going to say, Penn State in 1993,
right,
is that you've got blue bloods moving. So before this, we've had Maryland, Rutgers. Well, okay, I'm forgetting Nebraska. Nebraska goes to the Big Ten. But to have 2 of them, when we've seen these pairs leave, Maryland,
right,
Rutgers, Texas A&M, Missouri, and they're, when the Big East broke apart, there were a lot of good programs, decent programs, but the expectation that's going to be there for Texas and Oklahoma going to the SEC, and just the curiosity of how they're going to compete, I think is completely unmatched.
Yeah,
going back decades.
I think so too, and I think there's a large contingent of people that are taking on that Colin Cowherd and narrative that they're the Nebraska of the SEC now, get ready to be Vandy, whatever. I mean, making silly comparisons like that, when it's pretty simple to kind of debunk that. They still are recruiting in Texas. Nebraska lost their recruiting edge in Texas because of the fact that they moved to the Big Ten. You lose that pipeline because the reason, and this is something that I talked about before, I think it's the same reason that Colorado has struggled so bad in the pack, is because of the fact that now, and they talk about how they have more alumni, and it's by small points of percentage points. You know what I mean? Like nothing. But how many of those guys are out there watching football games when they're in California? And I would tell you, most of them don't watch it that much out there, particularly at places like Stanford and Cal and stuff. So to me, and even like you saw SC, they didn't start filling that stadium until the end of the season last year. You know what I mean? And they were in position to win the conference. So to me, it was kind of one of those deals where you start. I feel like when they were in the Big 12, they were in Texas a lot, so they had kids from Texas. They had a great place to pull from, and it's the same thing for Nebraska. Once they got stuck out in the Midwest, you're not going to recruit against Ohio State and Ohio. You're not going to get those kids. Good luck getting those kids from Florida to come. And now the Texas parents, their parents aren't going to be able to go see them play anymore. So you kind of lost that. So it's to me, Oklahoma is almost a suburb of Dallas. You know what I mean? Oklahoma City and Norman. And so they're not losing that at all. In fact, that's and on top of that, Coach Venables has brought a pipeline that he had established there at Clemson from Florida. So, and plus being in the SEC, those parents from the kids that are coming from Florida, they'll get to see their kids some, because it's in the area. So I feel like it's not going to be, and Oklahoma would not be okay with not being a real program. So, I think that they're going to take their lumps a little bit. I think both schools probably will, as well as their recruiting. And I think that starting off, you're probably going to, even if you go in hot, I think you look at Oklahoma's schedule first season, you got Alabama and Tennessee at home, you got LSU and Auburn on the road, so. And man, that's tough, along with Missouri and stuff like that. But and then South Carolina. You've got some up and comer SEC teams. It's a tough schedule, I think everybody's kind of got a tough schedule. It doesn't look like Texas is quite as tough that first year, but I feel like you may have an adjustment period there. Then again, you could go out there and be great if your defense is what it looks like it could be. And recruiting wise, they're starting to pull some guys that it looks like they're going to build that Clemson style defense in Norman as well. So,
I think they're going to benefit from something Texas A&M benefited from, and that's having the SEC patch. So not making a comparison between Oklahoma's tradition or their brand or their history and Texas A&M, because that's not a comparison, but just saying that, to your point, Nebraska left the area and they cut off their recruiting. And I can only think of one school in the Big Ten that can go to Texas and get its fair share of players, and that's Ohio State. And they're just a national brand. It's a different deal. But with Oklahoma, they actually strengthen their ties because Texas A&M has already been established in the SEC now for 11 seasons. And now Texas is going to be there as well. And I see two basic reasons why players in that area, especially in the defensive side, were moving on from the Big 12 and leaving the area and going to the SEC. And that would be, number one, we want to develop ourselves to be NFL players. So we want to play against the best. And when the Big 12 didn't produce, that there are some staggering numbers on the lack of defensive players produced in the NFL draft by the Big 12 in recent years. So, you're going to the SEC, you're playing with NFL players, you're playing against NFL players at a higher rate. And then number two, there's just a handful of times in a season, Texas, Oklahoma being the marquee game, that the Big 12's on the map nationally from coast to coast, a Big 12 game. Right. Whereas in the SEC, those games are happening every week, multiple games, and players want to be noticed. They want to be on the big stage.
Sure. Yeah, you're right. And you look at the draft, all you got to do is look at the draft numbers, like you said, and you can tell that the greatest number of both sides of the football, draft picks are coming from the SEC. I think the only one that is probably doesn't favor the SEC would be quarterback. I think that you've done pretty well as far as Big 12 quarterbacks, particularly recently. And then you've got some guys in the ACC, of course, and then the Pac-12 does produce some quarterbacks. So it's, but then again, the Big 12 has been the leader of the QBs for the last probably 10 years or so anyway. But I'll tell you, you're right. And with what you need to win national championships, though, is what is coming out of the SEC to the NFL is those big boys on the defensive line, edges, linebackers. I mean, the defensive side of the football, and you got to be big there. And that's what you're seeing. I think that that's the biggest benefit that you're seeing really for Texas as well is in the trenches, that you're starting to see these guys are getting much bigger than they were. They're building these teams like SEC powerhouses. And so are they going to take their lumps? Probably a little bit. I'm Sooner Cowboys and fail PV. Sooner Cowboys is notorious on my channel for his doom and gloom predictions, but I understand what he's talking about. You really do have to. You want to see them kind of go in with some momentum, having at least played for the Big 12 championship. Again, but I'll tell you, and this is something that I hate talking about this, but it's something that's real. At some point, yeah, a lot of people are saying that. But again, we just talked about why this is not real. If you believe that sentiment, then you're really not paying that much attention. You know what I mean? Because that's such an easy place to go to. It's just such an easy place to go to. So, but I really think that to me, you have to get there. Yeah, they're and like Bishop Frank's saying, that they're in the top 5 for 5 stars. They've always been that. So this is not the same thing as Nebraska, for instance. But I think that the biggest thing is just going to be getting in there and kind of feeling it out. A lot of the people in the SEC, you've got some fan bases, and I think it's mostly like Missouri that says stuff like this because they're a former somewhat rival, I guess. They played against them forever. I would never call them a rival, but some people will. But I would never call them a rival. But they're saying that kind of stuff about Nebraska and like even themselves, and I don't know. I think Missouri, I like their coach right now, but I don't know that their fans, they still believe what they believe or whatever, that they're going to come in and not do anything. I think that you probably turned to, well, and at least for one, that, Oklahoma's been winning. Texas hasn't. Texas needs to step up and do it in order to do it. But they're building a team that they hadn't been able to build before even themselves, even for being that blue blood status that they are. And I think that you've got, when you add what you can get from the SEC to programs that are storied like that, I think that the people that know, they know, that they know, and they're a little worried about what they're about to see from these two teams coming in there, right? Because they are going to get those guys that was keeping them from beating them before, and so I think it's going to be a big deal. I think it's a big deal already, and yeah, I think that they need to go through and do very well in the Big 12. I think that that's to have, just for the sake of continuing this recruiting momentum. You really want to, kind of finish it off pretty good. In the end, what I was bringing up, and I kind of stopped myself, but the officiating last year was really bad against Oklahoma and against Texas. It's a fact that there was 4 total holding calls against OU and Texas opponents, one of them against an Oklahoma opponent in conference play. And that was one of the things that I saw at Big 12 Media Days. They started asking Yormark about if it would be bad for the Big 12 if one of those two teams, or if they played for it and if one of them won it. And he kind of laughed it off. He didn't really answer it. And that concerns me a little bit. I got to tell you, I'm telling you, I still feel like it's going to be, you can see Xavier Worthy going down the sideline for a touchdown and getting tripped by a line judge or something, just because it's just, I don't know that they're going to allow it. I hate to believe that way, but when you start seeing some of the things that have been going around the country a lot lately, and there's in a lot of different arenas, but I was thinking about the recruiting stuff and all this stuff that's been going on with Florida. I don't know if you've been paying attention to some of that or not, but you got 10 guys that dropped an average of 70 places in the recruiting rankings, and there's nothing going on that they're getting evaluated right now. How can this be? So there's some things that are going on that are a little fishy. So I know what I saw last year. I can tell you that Texas Tech game, that field goal at the end of the game looked pretty good from the perspective of now that doesn't mean it was over the top of the bar, so I'm not saying that. But the one thing that I would say about it is they didn't have a camera on that goalpost, which you will ask why. You know what? You know, they should have had that. And that just leaves you open for questioning, and conspiracy theorists abound. It's just one of those things. So I don't know. It's gonna be what it is, but I tend to wonder how much of it is going to be in the hands of OU and Texas if they don't go out there and just beat the crap out of everybody. If they leave it in a situation where they could get hurt by the officials, who's to say they won't? I don't know.
Jason's here breaking down the Sooners for us here at the Voice of College Football. This is our Oklahoma show that we present each and every Wednesday, 12:30 Eastern, 11:30 a.m. Get on over to College Football Hall of Fame podcast with Jason. And you guys are going live. When is the next time?
We're going to I've got some more lives planned. In fact, I'm going to do one this evening. We're going to start doing some deep dives into some of these teams in the Big 12. We're going to try to get those knocked out, and then we're going to do the same with the SEC leading up to the season, at least with the main contenders in the SEC as well. So yeah, and here in the next week or so is when I plan to start ramping it up to where we're going at least 3 to 4 times a week, going up to 5 by the time the season starts. So we'll be live 5 days a week, a couple hours a day. So we're excited, man. We're excited about it. So but yeah, I think, Bishop Frank, you're right. I think that's the way you have to do it, is you have to go in there and beat the brakes off of everybody in order to not, what is this? Phil BV, you're such a weird dude, man. Such a weird guy. Come in here. Mr. Oklahoma fan that's got Phil BV as his name. Weird stuff. He's got to be an Okie Light fan, man. He's got to be.
Well, I will let you figure that out. In the meantime, we will go to the latest commit and talk about going to SEC country. Oklahoma goes to Gray, Georgia. And get these measurements, folks. 5'9", 150. He can only play one position, right? It's wide receiver. Yeah. This reminds me of back in the day, Gerald McNeil, the Ice Cube, playing for the Cleveland Browns. Zion Ragins, who's a top roughly 200 player in the nation.
I like him, man. He had some injuries, I guess, last season. From what you can tell here, he had 46 catches. What did you say? 557 and 3, but missed 3 games of the season. But his sophomore year was really good at 63 catches with 9 touchdowns and over 1,000 yards. So, speed guy. Obviously, when you're that small, you got to have a lot of speed and agility. Looks like he's going to be. I mean, the film, I was just kind of pulled it up whenever you were introducing the show, and yeah, he's got some game, and that's what you got to kind of have some of those take the top off guys that, they've been getting some of the bigger kids, but some of those speed guys, you've got a couple of them coming in on the next couple of classes. So this is big right here for him to be able to, for them to go and get this guy and particularly to pull him out of Georgia's backyard. It doesn't hurt anybody's feelings either, being a 4-star and, listen, these are the kids that, again, if we're worried about what they're going to be and, Nebraska is not, that's not a realistic thing. Nebraska is not going and pulling anybody out of Georgia, or Florida or anywhere else that they're able to recruit out of. So yeah, I think he's going to have to put a little weight on, he's going to have to get in the gym with Smitty, but I think that this kid, he's obviously a take the top off of the guy, off the defense guy.
Yeah, Nebraska is not pulling out top 200 players out of Georgia and Florida. They go down there, but they are battling for the leftovers, and I don't want to downgrade those guys to that degree. But right. Guys that could possibly turn out to be good players, but generally won't. And are ignored by the top schools in the SEC and by the Florida teams, and they're getting more like top 400 to 600 players out of those states. So Zion Ragins, he obviously can move, and he obviously has a lot of wiggle. And I got to think, once the strength and conditioning, now the strength and conditioning for a guy like this is obviously they're going to tailor make that a little bit different for him. It's not like they're going to bulk him up to 200 pounds. Maybe he's 165. Maybe they add 15 pounds, possibly.
Yeah.
Something in that range, you would think.
Yeah, you're not going to put too much on him, but just getting some strength on him, trying to get him a little more durable, I would imagine as well, because you are going to be going through that SEC schedule. They got some hard hitting safeties and corners. So yeah, I don't see him putting on a ton of weight, but you probably don't want him to, but it looks like, he is fast. He's fast, man. Yeah. That's who was just saying that? He goes, this looks, perfect cracker city, makes everyone else look like they're standing still. Yeah, that's awesome, man. Pretty fun stuff.
And then you also had an offensive lineman that you wanted to highlight as well, correct?
Defensive tackle.
Defensive tackle.
Yeah, it's sure. They've got this Lee Summit High School out in Missouri, Kansas City area is putting out some guys, man. You had obviously last year you had Caden Green, who's kind of looking like he might be a starter as a freshman on the offensive line. Now they are looking, obviously, Williams Waneri, defensive tackle, who is the #1 defensive lineman in the country, who's been slated to go to OU all summer. And now you have the kid's name is Kamori Moore. He's 6'1", 321, also a defensive tackle out of Lee Summit, teammate of Williams Waneri right now. Brandon Drum has him future casted to go to Oklahoma. It looks like there's a little pipeline there. They're finding, and those are the kind of guys that you would expect Nebraska to, if they were going to be in the mix for some of this, to get better than what they were, they're going to need to pick up these guys. Oklahoma has found a way to get these Kansas and Missouri kids that, you would probably want to see, end up in other places if you're a Midwestern guy, if you're a Kansas State guy even. So big deal, it's a big deal there. So, and that there's that big guy again, we're talking about the trenches, and there he is. So yeah, that's a big deal for him.
We'll take your comments and questions for the next 15 or 20 minutes here at the Voice of College Football. OU Sooners Live here with Jason Watkins. Again, Hall of Fame College Football Podcast is your destination with Jason. And keep it locked in here at the Voice of College Football. We've got a Sooner tailgate show with Jason Ray that he delivers every Friday at 4 Eastern, 3 Central. And Jason's got a lot of good feedback as he looks at primarily football, but he'll sneak a few other things in there as well.
I've been checking it out. The show's real good, man. I like Jason's show.
Appreciate that.
Started that one out. Yeah.
Appreciate that. So the guys will hit the field right around August 1st. And information is difficult to get out of camp. You got to listen to interviews, coaches, coordinators.
Sure.
A little bit from the players, and then some video will leak out. Some of the media, depending on the team, some media gets to stick around. Gets to stick around for a decent amount of time on occasion. Others don't. Depends on the head coach and how paranoid he is. But when you put it all together, once we get toward, the end of August, what is going to make you feel better about this football team or cause more concern than what you've got now? What are you tracking during August?
Well, I think that just during the August part of it, you're looking to just see them to get through camp healthy. I think that that's the biggest thing, to come into that first week and be ready to go at your key positions. And particularly, as we said, in the trenches, I think. But August 1st, that's one of the things that, Williams Nwaneri will be making his choice that day. Everything is trending in the direction of Oklahoma, LBV, and Stone is almost definitely there. Jaden Jackson is his teammate at IMG. I don't know that he would be coming to Oklahoma if David Stone wasn't going to be in Oklahoma sooner. Just a thought, but keep holding on to that hope. Yeah, listen, I think that's the main thing. You're wanting to see that they kind of close on some of these deals, because that's when a lot of these guys are going to start making their decisions. They got there's going to be a couple of stragglers, I think, that are going to have a few visits once the season starts. But for the most part, I think you're going to see most of these guys make a choice by then. So again, we were kind of talking about this on one of the shows I was on last week, and about how many defensive linemen you're expecting. At that point, I really wasn't expecting Jaden Jackson. I actually hadn't expected Jaden Jackson very much. If it still stays the same as what we've been talking about, and where we know that they're targeting the hardest, as far as Todd Bates and all these other guys, you start looking at, you might get 6 or 7 guys that play somewhere on the defensive line out of this class, and that is insane. I mean, even if you got 3 or 4, we're talking about a foundation that is ready to rock and roll when you get to the SEC. So that middle of the pack stuff is just, silly talk. But, if you're able to do it, if you get 7, man, I mean, look, if they can develop, and they've got, listen, Schmitty is one of those guys that he's trained 7 Heisman Trophy winners. This guy knows what he's doing. There's no longer do you have the yoga teacher at USC that was with Lincoln. They're getting big. They're going to stay big, and that's a good thing. I love to throw that in there. That's actually one of Hank's. Hank is one of my favorites. So Hank calls him the yoga teacher, and then I heard, what's the other one I heard the other day? Oh man, it was Pilates or something like that. It was funny. It was pretty funny. But look, it's a completely different program under these guys. And as great as Lincoln Riley is at dialing up an offense, right? Servicing that whole team, getting them big, it's not really his way. We're going to see that. We're going to continue to see that. But this is, I think that's something that, I think the main thing that I got from the Big 12 Media Days from Venables was hearing that, look, we're still right where we thought we were going to be. I said we needed to tear it back to the studs when I got here. We've done that. They've now replaced 86% of the players. I mean, I think he said out of 123 total kids in the program, 90 something of them are new. So, it's been a complete turnaround. The guys that stayed around, I mean, they're just good players, and they were able to kind of figure it all out. And so that's the whole deal. USC will be tough. Yeah. Okay. I think they win 8 this year. I think they win 8. I think that their last half of that season sets up really hard for them. And when they beat Utah, I'll believe they can beat Utah. But I don't see it. But that's funny. Yeah. Richard Simmons. Yeah. That's what Jimmy calls him, Richard Simmons. That's hilarious. That's Coach Wiley is his name. But yeah, that's hilarious.
Yeah, this is what you generally create and set up for the coaches' wives. Let's put together a Pilates class or yoga, and the coaches' wives can go.
They're doing it for defensive linemen. Oh, I love it. I love it. I love it.
I don't know how that Lincoln Riley USC deal is going to land. I really don't. I don't have full confidence that he's got it in him to lead a national championship program, but he obviously knows what he's doing. He's, like you just said, he can dial up an offense with the best of them.
He can. And I mean, there's no denying that. There's no arguing it either. I feel like, to me, if there's anybody aside from Georgia that should be favored to win the national championship this year, I think it's Clemson. I think that because Garrett Riley, the difference in Max Duggan from Garrett Riley being there to not being there it was night and day.
Sure.
Night and day. And it's because it's an offense that you can pick up pretty easy. They're able to scheme these guys into positions where they can kind of win matchups, right? It doesn't necessarily translate as well to the pro game as far as that goes for a lot of these guys. But when it comes to getting it done at this level, I think that Clemson's going to have one of the best, if not the best, defenses in the country. Now you add a Lincoln Riley, Garrett Riley offense with it. Now you got something to go with. That's not what Lincoln has at USC. Even though he got Bear's not going to play 60 snaps. He's not going to do it. One of the guys that I got to meet with the coaches, one of his former players from Dallas Skyline, Stephen Coleman, he kind of played in that rotation with Tommy Harris and then later Gerald McCoy. And I mean, we're talking about a big dude, defensive tackle guy. And he was talking about that. You really want him to play 30, 35 snaps if you can, and you rotate 4 guys. So, you're not going to get 70 snaps out of Bear either. He didn't do that at Georgia. So it's great that you got one, but what's he going to do when he gets under Wiley? Is he going to lose 30 pounds? You know what I mean? I don't know, because I can tell you one thing is I'm of the belief that you saw the best iteration of that USC program last year. They're as big as they were going to be. I think they're going to get smaller. You saw that with Oklahoma every year that Lincoln was in town. They got smaller everywhere. That's just the way it was. And because Schmitty left. And so it was a different deal with Wiley there. It really is that way. And if you go back and look at some of these rosters, you can tell. I was at the Rose Bowl the year that they lost to Georgia in double overtime. And then the next year, watching them play in the Orange Bowl against Alabama, it was night and day difference on the size then, just from one year to the next. And it just continued to kind of get that way, to be that way. And, again, he's 0 for 4 or 0 for 3, and it really 0 for 4 because he was the OC in the playoff. Only one of the games was close. The rest of them, Venables really made him look bad in the first one that they went to with his offense. I mean, he did. So it was what it was. Probably down to 280, Center Cowboy says. Yeah, he might be.
Well, again, we'll see. And
they got the Heisman quarterback, so it's going to give them something. And they're always going to have receivers and running backs. And that's one thing that Lincoln does different than Leach ever did, is run the football very well out of the air raid. So.
Yes. He had top-notch rushing attacks, of course, at Oklahoma. And, they're going to go into a league next year where it's about the line of scrimmage. So they're going to be an outlier there. Now, whether that works for them or not, they're going to bring an offense that not everyone sees on a regular basis unless they're playing Ohio State. So there's that. But on the flip side, the physicality in that league is way above the Pac-12.
I agree.
Just a different league. So that's going to be, to really have a full evaluation for me on Lincoln Riley. I got to see a season in the Big Ten to see how this projects long term. But he's a guy that's tied himself to a defensive coordinator, Alex Grinch, who's never produced a strong defense outside of Washington State. He did wonders at Washington State, turning 2 and 3 stars into not a great defense by any stretch, but a much more capable defense than what they had there previously. And initially, it looked like that was going to be the trend at Oklahoma, but it just never took hold.
Right. Yeah. And from what you hear about out of Ohio State, whenever he left there, they weren't really, they weren't upset that he was leaving. And they've still kind of struggled to get that back, of what they were prior to that. And I think that's probably the biggest reason you're seeing Ryan Day catch so much hell from fans and, the like. I don't know. But that's the thing is, like, I was going to ask you that. How do you feel like that offense is going to play out there? Because a lot of people talk about, I know JJ Kitchen, he was talking about it. He's saying, hey, look, it's going to slow them down out there. The speed doesn't go quite as much in when it's that cold. in some of those places. It makes you kind of wonder what's going to happen at Wisconsin too with Phil Longo's offense. You know, they're gonna throw it around and do a lot of that kind of stuff. Is that speed going to be as decisive? But you know, because it is that line up and run over you league. You know, this is kind of how it is. So I think that Lincoln's offense, because of the fact that they've always been able to run the football, it could do a little better than what you've seen some of them. But and I think that that's why Ohio State's as good as they are. They got the best receiving room in the country year after year. But they can always run the football too. You know, they can always run the football. So it's I think that that's kind of why they've continued to kind of dominate the league up until the last couple of years. But as you see with Michigan, I mean that's what Harbaugh's doing. He wants to build the Bo Schembechler type with just, you know, being able to go over the top as well. But, you know, I don't know. I feel like it's going to be a tough deal. And a lot of people are wondering whether or not Lincoln will even be around or if he's just going to leave with Caleb Williams. And I mean, I could see that happening. You know, I know he's got a big
coach in
contract.
the NFL.
I think he could, man. I think he could. It's, you know, I have my feelings about what possibly could happen. And the reason being is because I think that it's become obvious to a lot of people, and particularly with Oklahoma fans and what we saw and in his time there. And I think it's even the most ardent USC fans have to see it, you know, that as bad as they were defensively and it fits, you know, and you go out and get Cliff Kingsbury instead of getting you a new DC, you know what I mean? It's just weird, you know, and you win the Heisman Trophy and can't beat Utah, lose to Tulane. I don't know. I could see that if he's getting exposed, but he would still be able to dial it up in the NFL, they're going to give it a shot. Look at Kingsbury got fired from Texas Tech and ends up with the freaking Cardinals job. Well, go figure that. Failing up. You know, it was weird.
Well, I think the thought process with Alex Grinch was bring him from Oklahoma, really can't evaluate him totally on one season because he's still getting his guys. They're still working the transfer portal. The defense didn't get any better. So
Right.
that's a problem. But it was really bad in 21 and just was bad again in 22. So I would have thought that a good defensive coordinator, but I've made the same criticism of Brent Venables, could take a defense that ranks about 120 in the nation and make it a top 80 defense or so.
Sure.
And neither happened at either stop USC or Oklahoma.
Right. Yeah, definitely. And the one thing I would say about that is with OU, with that 3-3-5, and this is where I have been disagreeing with Cody from Locked On Oklahoma State, is that he thinks that the 3-3-5 is going to be really helpful for them this year. It's their first year running it. They've got a lot of new guys. I do feel like when it comes to, you've seen it everywhere he's been. The second year, they make a marked jump. And that was one thing that you saw out of him at Big 12 Media Days, is he was very confident in what he thinks this defense is going to be. The question that I asked him whenever I got my opportunity was, hey, what is this defense going to be like? Because we see that the offense is going to be good. It was good last year. You know, I asked him about the portal and what that meant to it, but what he thought about it. And you could see it in his eyes. He is pumped about what he's about to see out of this defense. And that for good reason. If you start looking at the differences in the places that they do, look, Danny Stutzman led the league in tackles. He just made some bad mistakes at times that kind of hurt him. Now he's been in the system for a year, that, you know, he's going to know where to be, what gap to be in. Obviously, they got to put it on the field, but, you know, I know one thing is that I hadn't seen a spring game in a long time where I felt like the defense won it at all, or it was even competitive really with an Oklahoma offense. And this, I mean, the offense had to scratch and claw to get anything going against that defense, when, you know, and almost every wave of it, even. It's getting better. Are they going to be top 10 like Pearson said? Probably not. Are they going to be top 50, top 40? That's what BV thinks. You know, I think if they can get there, they're dangerous. You know, I think they are.
Jason, before we take off, of course, the big decisions coming down on Friday, Taylor Tatum, USC, Oklahoma, speaking of those two.
Yeah.
Do you have a good feel about this?
everything that you've heard from him pretty much has been pro OU. It seems pro OU. He talked about how his dad and DeMarco Murray are best friends. And then he's talked about how he talks to DeMarco every day. And it seems like last week I heard something. It seemed like USC was already making excuses for not getting him. So there was a lot of that talk going around. I didn't see the exact things that were said, but it was just a lot of that chatter about that they're already making these excuses and stuff. So look, the future casts that are out there, the crystal balls that are out there are for Oklahoma. It wouldn't really surprise me if he didn't, because of the fact that they are so deep and they've got some freshman kids coming in. They're young already in the room. I still believe that this is, with or without Taylor, without Tatum, they're going to still be a top 5 running back room. They are. With him, holy crap! I don't know that there's enough footballs to go around, but I think that it looks right now like he's going to be in Oklahoma. We're just going to have to wait and see, I guess.
Sooners Live, folks.
I don't know.
Sooners Live, folks, every Wednesday here at the Voice of College Football. Appreciate you stopping by. Bring your friends next Wednesday with you, 12:30 Eastern, 11:30 a.m. Central. Again, a friend or two or 50 would be great. Absolutely. Bring them on here. Let's talk some college football. In the meantime, check out Jason's work, his Hall of Fame College Football Podcast. There it is, Hall of Fame College Football Podcast with Jason.
Appreciate you. All right, man. Mark, I appreciate it, man.
I appreciate you being here because you're making this show roll. So thank you so much for that.
No worries, man. I enjoy it. Thanks a lot, guys.
I am headed directly, folks, to the main channel to talk some Arkansas football with our guy, Ty Hudson. They just got done at SEC Media Days with Sam Pittman and the crew. So we're going to check that out and hear his analysis on Arkansas football. So that's the next stop here at the Voice of College Football. We will see you soon.
Thanks.